Imagine being hit by a motorcycle and immediately seeing it as a gift. This is the Stoic test. How could a big challenge actually be a blessing in your life? Today, we're joined by William B. Irvine, renowned Stoic philosopher and author of the book, The Stoic Challenge. He reveals how Stoicism teaches us to reframe even the worst setbacks, like the time he was hit by a motorcycle a couple of months ago, into things that build us into the greatest version of ourselves. Be sure to hit subscribe because we talk about ways that life can be happening for you and not to you every single week. Welcome to Good Mood Revolution. Bill, welcome to Good Mood Revolution.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for asking me.
I am such a big fan of your work because the one thing that we know as a certainty in life is we're going to experience setbacks and challenges. And I still don't want to fall into major distress when they happen. And your books are just such a blessing for all of us about how to deal with these setbacks in a pretty profound way. I wanted to have you start out with any setbacks that you've recently encountered and maybe talk with us about something that's real life that maybe we all can relate to.
Yeah, sure. So in the book, Stoic Challenge, I tell about a setback, just getting to a hotel and going a long way upstairs to my room to find that it wasn't ready and so on. But that's only one, and I just chose that. Recently, I experienced kind of the equivalent of an Olympics of setbacks. So I had a chance to take my Stoic practice and put it to work. So my wife and I were traveling. We were touring Vietnam. We had made it all the way from the north in Hanoi. We were down in Ho Chi Minh City, formerly known as Saigon. And it turns out that Vietnam is the motorcycle capital of the world. I mean, it's per capita has the most motorcycles, and they travel in swarms. It's absolutely incredible. The roads are packed with them, and they're always honking their horns. And our guide said the trick is if you cross the road, you move very slowly and you never back up, because they will flow around you like water around a rock, okay? So we did it. We always had a guide with us, but we were in Saigon, which is where the motorcycles are the worst. By the way, you can't use the sidewalks because that's where they park their motorcycles, all sorts of little things. So we were in a hotel there and had some hours to kill. And so we were told that there was this really nice marketplace 2 blocks away. So we thought, well, that isn't too bad. And we went out, crossed the street at a crosswalk. And before I knew it, I was down on the ground. My wife said, yelling. So there was a moment there when I lost my Stoic presence of mind, But the Stoics actually say that will happen, when you experience anger, it's a reflex, and that's forgivable. But what happens next is on you. So
you were hit by a motorcycle.
Hit by a motorcycle.
How fast do you think they were going?
Yeah, 25. I don't know.
And so you're not on a motorcycle. You're just
no, I'm walking on a crosswalk across the street, and I had looked to see. Now, here's the thing. I noticed when I was with a guide, you would look up and you would see that the motorcycle coming right at you, the person was texting while driving. So it's a dangerous thing. There are 2 ways I can tell this.
It's kind of like a real life Frogger. You remember that game Frogger, and you got to hop forward and make sure you don't get run over by the cars. You go to Saigon and you're playing Frogger with motorcycles.
Yes. And so anyway, there's 2 versions of the story. I'll tell the short version. First, I went to 3 different emergency rooms and I'm fine now. The longer version would require about an hour, and it's got all sorts of details and background and setups, but we don't have that much time. So I'll hit the highlights that as soon as I got down and got up and got over that initial burst of adrenaline, then I realized, oh, this is a Stoic challenge. This is a test. And now what happens next? It's on me whether this becomes a traumatic experience that mars maybe the rest of my life, but maybe, it's certainly for weeks or months, or what I do with it, how I package it. I couldn't help it happening, but I can help I can control how I package it.
I think this is really profound. And in your book, The Stoic Challenge, when you start out with the airport story and the flight is delayed and they deplane you and then they put you back on the plane and then they deplane you again. And then they say a new plane is coming. And then they say a new plane is not coming. You're going to go to the hotel. As all this is happening, you recognize I could get very angry. I could completely emotionally break down, but instead you choose different words. And your words are, oh, this is a test from the Stoic gods. This is a test.
You repackage it. You say, I'm going to set this. I'm going to frame this. The word is a technical term is I'm going to frame it. I'm going to frame it as a Stoic challenge. Who gives these challenges? The Stoic gods. Why do they give them? Are they just mean? No, because they want you to be strong. And I mean, think about coaching. If you were in sports as a kid or even as an adult, what's a good coach do? Does he pamper you? No. He pushes you beyond your limits so that you're ready for the challenges that come.
I want our listener to really grasp this because we could just gloss over it. But our listener and me and you, we're going to be tested again. And the test could show up next week. It could show up next month. It could show up next year. But at some moment, there's going to be a big test. Maybe it's getting hit by a motorcycle as we're crossing the street. And our initial response could be immediate anger. But our second response really could be what you're saying is to say, this is a Stoic test. And it is the Stoic gods are testing me to help me become stronger. Can I pass this test? And I think this amount of awareness is really a key to not falling apart.
Yeah. And, life is full of ups and downs. Things are never as good as they seem and they're never as bad as they seem. And it's like, on a river, it's going to be up, it's going to be down. And once you realize that, and so there's a lot of minor setbacks, you go to brush your teeth and realize you're out of toothpaste. And the biggest setback is you realize, wow, I've got a fatal illness and I've got a limited amount of time left. But that whole notion, so I realized one of the first, and these are things I've been doing on smaller setbacks for decades now. And one of them is you think about how things could be worse. And, you just got knocked down and you were on the pavement from this. How could it have been worse? And the very first thing, I didn't conk my head. Had I conked my head, it could have been fatal. Or, my brain was just generating these ways it could have been worse. Or when I was lying down, I didn't conk my head, but another motorcycle in the pack could have run over me. Would have been much, much worse. Could have been fatal. And worst of all, my wife had crossed ahead of me. And I was thinking, for me, what would have been worse if she had gotten hit rather than me? Because I would much rather be the one with whatever is going to go wrong and deal with it than watch her and have to be the outsider watching that.
So as you're needing to go to the emergency room, and you're obviously in physical pain because you were just run over, your mind is playing this mental gymnastics of it could have been worse on the sidewalk, of thinking all the different ways.
Though. I've done it so long and I've practiced on smaller things that it is now my reflex. But it doesn't just happen.
In your book, you say, when you're in a traffic jam. Yeah. A traffic jam is a common place for us to get frustrated. But you see a traffic jam as your training ground.
Hey. And you sort of say, this is a small setback because bigger ones are going to come. And this is to prepare me to be ready for, to be on guard when they happen. And so one of the things, I mean, this is Stoic patting yourself on the back, but that I rose to that particular challenge. And I know there's going to be even bigger challenges ahead. Death is the ultimate challenge, right?
Or
And
death of a loved one. Death of a loved one is, I think, for me, that's the hardest test.
Yes, those are going to be bigger ones. So, but this was a nice. This would be a midterm exam, on the Stoic tests. So then, what happened? Go ahead.
I don't mean to interrupt, Bill, but I have a pretty important question here. Why prepare for these tests? Why do all this work to have a Stoic reflex that allows us to not fall apart emotionally? Why not just let life take us through the ups and downs and the roller coaster of life? Why are you so diligent at wanting to be in control of your thoughts and emotions?
Okay, I'm not fully in control, but I have a fair degree of control, and I'm going to use the control I have in order to not to master, but to come up with strategies for dealing with negative emotions. So, what is your goal in living? What's the ultimate goal of the Stoics? And the Buddhists, by the way, shared this. It's equanimity. That is a life where you keep as many of the positive emotions as you can. And you can actually do things to enhance the number of positive emotions you experience. But you reduce the number of negative emotions you experience. And part of that is just by thinking about the future, you can prevent bad things from happening, or you can take steps to lessen the chance that they happen, but you can develop strategies. So when they do happen, they aren't as bad as they could be. Here's one thing I've noticed about myself. This is a late stage practice of Stoicism. Because I'm as appreciative of life as I ever have been in my life. I've found myself, I've given it a name. I've become a thankaholic. So we all know what an alcoholic is. But a thankaholic is somebody who, because he fully appreciates how wonderful the world is. My life isn't perfect, but it's wonderful. It's wonderful because I think of people in Sudan. I think of my, great-great-grandparents who would lose kids left and right to diseases that we now don't even consider. So it's a not perfect, but it's a wonderful life. And so I find myself thanking people a lot more than I ever did. And in fact, my reflexive thing when somebody thanks me is if you think for a second or two, you can think of a reason to thank them back. So sometimes at a book signing, I'll have people coming up to thank me for writing the book. And my reflexive answer now is, thanks for reading my book. And it really is true. It's a two-way kind of thing. And there are a lot of people that are just hungry that the world acknowledge their existence and efforts. And so to thank somebody is such a tiny thing to do. And yet it can make that person's day. So one of my mottos is, if you can make somebody's day, do it. It's a wonderful ability to have. And if you just think and put a little bit of effort to it, you can probably manage that. We talked about enhancing the highs, and that is learning to appreciate little things in life, learning to take delight in little things in life. Learn something about lichens. It's actually two different forms of life in a symbiotic relationship. Just turn something, it's like, that's incredible. But there's incredible all around us, but we're oblivious to it. So how do you get that sense of wonder, that sense of awe? You're going to have to do your homework. You're going to have to learn some more about the world. Rather than simply, caring about your internal existence, doom scrolling through whatever on your phone. So it requires a bit of effort, but not a huge amount of effort. And it's not like, hey, you got to go to college to do this. No, none of the famous Greek and Roman Stoics went to college, but they figured it out.
Epictetus was a slave.
Yes.
He came from the humblest of beginnings.
Yes. And Musonius Rufus, similar kind of thing. He's lesser known, but one of my favorites of the Roman Stoics. So that's the thing. But you also had emperors. You had Marcus Aurelius.
Yeah.
So it reaches a broad range of people. The message basically is there's a lot in life you can't control. And if you worry about that, you're going to have a life of anxiety. There's some things you have considerable control over. Those are what you should focus your attention on.
Yeah, I love the philosophy. And in your book, there was a quote that just stands out in my life. And you said, the biggest cost of a setback is the emotional distress it triggers. When
life has treated you unfairly, you have a basic choice. You can treat yourself as a victim, and you can wallow in victimhood after that. And it could be another person or a group of people, but it could be some event of nature, right? You can play the role of victim, and you're going to be miserable. And people are going to feel sorry for you. If that's what you want, well then. Or you can play the role of target, and you can say, you know what, I couldn't help the bad thing that happened to me, but I can help how I respond to it. I can rise to that challenge. And by doing that, not only will I make the impact of this challenge much smaller, but I'll strengthen myself. I'll learn resilience, because life's going to come up with other challenges. And by developing my resilience, when they happen, I'll be ready.
So let's go back to you on the sidewalk, your wife very, I'm sure concerned, you now needing to go to multiple emergency rooms. How bad did it get?
So I was able to stand. My fingers were dislocated.
Oh.
I had blood various places, but I was able to stand.
And you were a victim. You were a true victim. Like he came out of nowhere. He could have gone around you. He just ran right into you.
It was a she, and she apologized. I did not accept her apology. And that was, I was on an adrenaline something there. My wife says I used some choice words, but since she spoke Vietnamese and I spoke English, I'm not sure I did anything. So anyway, the first thing was getting help. How do you do that? Oh, easy. You dial 911. Well, it turns out they don't have 911 in Vietnam. They have 115. So 115 is Vietnamese for 911. And turns out that if you do that and your phone doesn't have a local Vietnamese SIM card, it's not going to work. So we figured out that, we can't actually get help here. And then one of the pack of motorcycle people stopped, and one said, well, hop onto the back of my motorcycle and I'll take you to the hospital. And I wasn't going to do that. And then somebody else said, oh, it's walkable. It's 2 blocks away. So I basically walked to the emergency room, and I'll get a lot of compression. There are, by the way, a whole bunch of jokes that could be happening at this point, because another frame I put the experience into was a comedic frame. I started looking for elements of humor in what was happening to me. Okay. So went to the emergency room, and they said, okay, you have dislocated fingers. They took x-rays. They said, but we can't help you. And I said, well, why not? And they said, we're a Vietnamese emergency room. If you want help, you have to go to an international emergency room. So they arranged. Yeah.
That's a super interesting frame, the comedic frame, because we all I love the Ben Stiller movies where everything's going wrong. One thing goes wrong after the next. And we're watching these and we're laughing so hard at how wrong it's going. And here in your own life, one thing's going wrong after the next, and you're finding the humor in it. That's a really cool frame.
There's the storytelling frame also. So beside the humor frame, my brain is saying, ooh, this has got the start of a great story. Anyway, they transported me by ambulance to the international hospital. And in the international hospital, they took more x-rays. They did a CAT scan and see if there's internal injury. The guy said, okay, we have to set your dislocated fingers. It was at that point where, a joke occurred to me. And that is, look, I had a dad who told dad jokes. as a dad, I told dad jokes. And there's a dad joke you can tell about somebody pulling on your finger. And, it was amazing because my brain, I was in that state, and yet my brain said, there's a joke here. There's a joke here. Anyway, long story short.
Hey, Doc, pull my finger.
Doc, pull my finger. Well, so, and then the interesting thing is now I could be still traumatized by it, but now I'm telling jokes about it. So I made a nice transition as far as that goes.
Oh, this whole time you could have completely, and you would have had every right to be a victim, to be angry, to say, this is the worst day of my life, to say, why is this happening? This shouldn't be happening. You could have been kicking and screaming the whole time. And as each new thing went wrong, it could have compounded about how awful it was. And then you could have been in a bad mood for months.
Yes. Now, I will admit that now I've become much more cautious crossing streets. So,
right.
But that's a kind of a reflexive thing. But now I'm basically on the other side of it. And, I like to think of it as a wake-up call from life, life saying, life is going to end. And sometimes it's going to be a big surprise, and sometimes it's going to come out of nowhere. And but this has been a wake-up call for you, because here you were just living the good life, and now suddenly what happens, you could have been killed just then. That could have been the end, and you'd be the last person to know what happened. So once you have that thought, life is so precious, and you realize that.
It becomes a gift. Yeah, that is amazing. It is amazing when what seems like the worst thing that could have happened, and I know you said it wasn't the very worst thing, but it's the worst thing that had happened in years to you, I'm sure, becomes one of the coolest things that happened, because it wakes you up to how amazing your life was. And we kind of, it goes back into this hedonic adaptation. One of the things I love in your book, you talk about, if there is a heaven, you say, we would probably adapt to how nice it is. Yes. Unless God is putting more setbacks in heaven for us to wake up to how nice it is there, we might just adapt to how nice everything is all the time. So setbacks actually help us realize that life is pretty amazing.
And if you make it to heaven and you have this sour attitude, unfortunately, that's going to go with you. And you're going to say, God's somebody else's favorite and not me. You're going to be miserable even in heaven, because it's your personality. A large part of your personality you can't control. So sometimes I get letters from people. They say, I have a lot of anxieties, and I will suggest cognitive behavioral therapy. I'll say you need to see a therapist, and it's actually rooted in Stoicism, though. It's a talking therapy rooted in Stoicism. If somebody says they're depressed, I say, you need to see a doctor. And otherwise, Stoicism can't help you. It's designed for rational people who can take bits of advice, like I've just been describing, and then is trying to make a joke out of it. Put it in a comedic frame. Pretend like you're being tested by these imaginary Stoic gods. But it requires a rational approach to things, and somebody who's deeply depressed is going to find that very challenging.
The best therapy we can get is rooted in this philosophy from 2,000 years ago. It's really, the human condition hasn't changed much, even though our circumstances have gotten more comfortable. The things we're dealing with are still so similar.
We have the same wiring as we did 2,000 years ago, the same emotional wiring. The thing is that they were the premier psychologists of the first century AD. And it's only in the 1970s that modern psychologists started catching up to some of the insights that they had.
One of my favorite stories that you told in your book was about a Stoic philosopher, and I'll struggle with his name, Paconius Agrippinus. And
Close enough for me.
He was challenging some of the strategies used by Nero the emperor at the time. And the guards come and they say, hey, you have been found guilty for treason, for speaking against our emperor. And he says to them, is this sentence death or banishment? And they said banishment. And he said, as you're seizing all my assets, did you happen to seize the home that I own outside in the country? They said, no, we did not. And he said, well, then I will go to that home and I will have a fine dinner tonight.
Good.
And he did this with no fuss. So, and it's such a cool thought that when our options get limited, these were your words in your book. When our options get limited, we choose the best of our options without fussing about it.
Yeah. What else? Well, you can fuss, but it's on you, and you're only making your own situation worse. And you can draw the pity of other people. If that's your goal in life, is to be an object of pity, that's not going to be a good life. And this whole deal about equanimity, would you rather be the richest man on earth with a troubled mind, or would you rather be just a kind of normal, humble person, but who has a mind that's blessedly clear of all of these, troubling kinds of thoughts?
Well, the goal of life is, I know the goal of life is equanimity, according to the Stoics. I believe that one of our goals in life is to feel as good as we can, to feel as joyful as we can, to feel as many positive emotions as we can. And this philosophy just helps us do that. This idea that the biggest cost of something that happens is our emotional distress is such an important idea. I'll talk with people. I'm a coach. I'm a coach that helps people deal with some challenging things. They'll lose their job, or they'll be upset that somebody has betrayed them, and they're just like they're hurting so much. And I'm helping them through it. But the reality is that you lose your job, you just find a new one. Without all the emotional distress, it's really pretty easy to go find a job, especially in today's job market. Somebody betrays you, that hurts, sure. But without the hurt, what do? You just move on with your day. You just go do the best you can today and do some fun things.
You can't change the past. You can't change tomorrow. And you can change today.
Yeah, right. We can't change that we lost the job. We can't change that this person did what they did. But by choosing to wallow in it today, that's the thing we can change. We can change. Will I wallow in this that's happened, or will I pick up and do the best I can today? And as that Stoic philosopher said, make the best choice of the options I have today without the fuss.
You got one life to live, and it's up to you. You have huge control over the quality of that life, regardless of the material circumstances.
You quoted Seneca in your book, and you said, Seneca said the first objective when someone betrays you is to not get angry.
Yeah.
That's hard
to do. Hard to do. But there are techniques you can use to avoid getting angry. I mean, if somebody, well, first of all, they have an interesting little caveat on this, and that is there are some people who understand only anger. And these are people who are going to be really slow-witted, and they're used to just responding to anger. So one of the ways you can affect their behavior is by pretending to be angry. So the Stoics said, don't actually be angry, but they will listen to you if you pretend to be angry, because that's how they process things. Other than that, the anger will hurt you more than it will hurt them. And that is anger. It's easy to turn on. It's really hard to turn off. And so you have to take steps to avoid experiencing it. And you're human, so sometimes you will. And then you have to take steps to extinguish it as quickly as you can. One way to do that, by the way, is to put yourself in the shoes of the other person. It could be that the other person is indeed a really dastardly individual. And then you can sort of think about, well, how did they get to be that way? Maybe they had an unfortunate past. There's this parental luck of the draw, Maybe if you had been born to those parents, you'd be that way too. it can take some of the sting out of it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I fully agree. I think putting myself in the shoes of the other person is probably the best tool that I have when I'm really upset with somebody. Typically, when I do that, I notice that I had contributed something to the situation. I wanted to talk about the 5-second rule.
Okay.
Can you tell me a little bit about how you developed this?
Well, there's a 5-second rule for food, and that is when you drop something on the floor, if you pick it up and eat it within 5 seconds, which my doctor friends have told me, no, it's not quite
That's not
like
true, because I've been using that rule since I
well,
was
it
a
depends
kid.
on what was on the floor, but with anger, it's a fuse that once you light it, it's going to go boom. And then it's going to stay in there. So one of the things when you detect yourself getting angry, the quicker you extinguish it or deal with it, the less likely it is to explode. But you got to be fast. So when I was knocked on the ground, it is interesting. I don't remember being knocked to the ground. I remember being on the ground. And I remember standing up confused and with visible blood. And so it was a reflexive kind of thing. I think Seneca would have forgiven me had he been there, and he would have explained how Vietnamese SIM cards work to me. He would have been helpful in many respects. But then again, that whole notion of you have to put out the fire very quickly, or it's gonna. And these things, I know that when I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm just my mind is going free, I will remember things did a decade ago that made me angry. And that is such a stupid waste of my time. And, because the things were such trivial things, and that still after a decade, it's there, it's echoing. That's just so incredibly stupid. But it takes work. It takes work. We're wired to remember, we're wired to care about our social status. And our ancestors who weren't wired probably didn't fare very well. But with thought, and mindfulness, we can deal with that.
My last question for you is for our listener. How can our listener take the Stoic challenge forward this week? What's one thing you would have them do this week?
Okay. Easiest single introduction is do negative visualization. Got the word negative in it, but it's okay. And that is what you do is you take something in your life that you appreciate and you imagine its disappearance from your life. And the thing that you appreciate could be your health, could be your job, could be your spouse, could be your pet dog. You pick something that you really appreciate. And now you take a few seconds to imagine that it suddenly disappears, and or something happens. You have a wife. You imagine getting that phone call no one wants to get. Your dog. You go to your doctor. He says, "Well, you've got cancer, and it's really serious." Then you only do that, so you don't dwell on that, but you entertain that thought for a few seconds. And then you go on with life. And it can have a profound impact of resetting your level of satisfaction with life. And you realize, wow, that thing, think of how terrible it would be if it was gone, but it's still part of my life. And I ought to be incredibly appreciative. So my wife, I do this routinely in the day. My wife will be mid-afternoon and she'll hear me. I'm in a back office here in our house. She'll hear me shout out, "Hey, thanks for existing." And she'll know I've been engaging in negative visualization. So I can take things that you would otherwise take utterly for granted and give them new meaning. So if you got kids and you imagine something happening to them, guess what? The next time the kids come up to you and say, "Daddy, will you read to me, please?" You're not going to say, "Well, I would, but I'm going to watch this ball game and I got other things to do." And you're going to say, "Gosh, it's really wonderful that they're part of my life. and I'm gonna do the dad thing because I can. So the thing is, it wears off, and before long, you'll be right back where you were before, taking it for granted. But you can do this negative visualization over and over.
That's such a beautiful habit. And I came to tears a couple of times as you were talking, just picturing getting the phone call from my wife and picturing one of my children not making it. And I will hug them all tighter today because of this conversation.
Tell him Bill sent you.
I'll say, Bill, you can tell Bill, thank you.
Okay.
Bill, I want to say thank you. I'm going to be a thankaholic to you. Your work has made a profound impact in my life and the lives of so many. I just appreciate what you've done and what you've put out there for all of us to benefit from.
Well, thank you so much for having me on, and thanks to your listener for giving me a listen.
Yeah, if there's somewhere that you would send them to learn more about you, where would you send them?
WilliamBIrvine.com. William, B as in boy, Irvine.com. And they'll find out more about me than any human being should be exposed to. I have free stuff for them to listen to, free stuff to read, and it needs an uplift, by the way, but still there's a lot of great stuff there.
Well, Bill, I sincerely appreciate you. Thank you for being on this week. Today we learned that life's toughest moments can be our Stoic test, if we're ready. Here are my top 5 takeaways from today's episode with Bill. Number 1, setbacks are tests, if we view them that way. Stoicism reframes obstacles as purposeful tests, given to help us build strength, resilience, and happiness, rather than seeing it as complete misfortune. Number 2, negative visualization can cultivate gratitude. If we imagine the loss of something we love, like a spouse or a child or even our own health, this can help us appreciate them and the things in our life even more deeply today. Number 3, become a thankaholic. Expressing genuine appreciation and gratitude and saying thank you all the time enhances how much we love our life. Number 4, your response matters most. When setbacks happen, and setbacks are inevitable, it is not the setback that damages us. It's the emotional response that we choose to take. That's the most damaging piece. And we get to choose our emotional response. So we're actually in control of our happiness. And number 5, humor can heal. Finding humor in challenging moments can make them less challenging and can even make them comical. Now it's your turn. In moments of challenge, what's your initial reaction? Is it to fight reality or to embrace it? In the comments below, just write fight or embrace. I want to hear from you. And be sure to hit that subscribe button because we'll have powerful insights like today every single week. This is Good Mood Revolution. We'll see you next week.